happens when a quiet American neighborhood suddenly becomes a war zone. In Jackson County, Georgia, families awoke to the thunder of flashbang grenades, armored SWAT vehicles rolling through suburban streets, and federal agents shouting orders to cartel operatives barricaded inside. It looked less like a routine arrest and more like a battlefield. Behind the shattered calm lay one of the most dangerous cartel strongholds ever uncovered in the American South, an operation armed not just with pistols and cash, but with assault rifles, military-grade gear, and even a grenade launcher. Investigators say the scale of this raid revealed something deeper than local drug crime. It was proof that cartels once thought to be confined to the borderlands are embedding themselves into the very heart of U.S. communities. The fact that such a paramilitary-style base was discovered in Georgia, a state already reeling from a dramatic spike in overdose death, signals that the cartels are no longer just suppliers. They are occupiers establishing permanent outposts within American soil. This Georgia raid was not an isolated event. In the past 2 years, intelligence agencies have observed similar patterns across the United States, echoing the tactics of global insurgencies. Cartel networks have begun mirroring the methods of militias and foreign paramilitary forces, stockpiling heavy weapons to deter law enforcement. The seizure of a grenade launcher in Athens is chilling, but not surprising to those who have studied transnational crime groups. Analysts at Jane's Defense Weekly noted that cartels have learned from international conflicts, adapting strategies used in Mexico, Ukraine, and even the Middle East, where improvised heavy weapons are used to overwhelm state forces. To understand the magnitude of the Georgia operation, the numbers speak volumes. Agents seized 26 firearms, including 12 rifles. Alongside them, a cache of cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl, enough to kill nearly 7 million people, was removed from circulation. In real terms, that's more than the population of Arizona wiped out in a single stroke. For communities already grieving a 53% rise in overdose deaths, the revelation that so much poison had been stored locally was nothing short of a nightmare. But here is where the story intersects with global security. Western security experts warn that America's war on cartels is increasingly tied to broader geopolitical flashpoints. Just as Russia supplies weapons to proxy militias in Ukraine, and Iran arms groups across the Middle East, cartel firepower is flowing into the United States. A senior analyst at the Center for Strategic and International Studies explained that the cartel's use of military weapons inside U.S. borders mirrors the gray zone tactics seen in Russia's hybrid warfare non-state groups destabilizing nations from within. If cartels can embed themselves in Georgia today, what's to stop them from expanding their influence across other vulnerable regions tomorrow? The raid also exposes the vulnerability of soft targets like university towns. Athens, Georgia, home to more than 40,000 students at the University of Georgia, was not randomly chosen. Cartels deliberately exploit these populations, flooding campuses with counterfeit prescription pills disguised as study aids. A single fentanyl-laced Adderall can turn an all-night study session into a fatal overdose. The FBI has called this trend weaponized addiction, where chemical warfare is waged on America's youth for profit. From a NATO perspective, the parallels are striking. Cartels now operate like insurgent cells, destabilizing communities in ways reminiscent of how Russian-backed militias eroded Ukrainian sovereignty years before the full-scale war. Western intelligence officials caution that this is not just about drugs, but about sovereignty and security. As one former NATO commander told DW, if heavily armed paramilitary groups can carve out safe havens in the US, the consequences will ripple into transatlantic security. Allies will question how secure America's rear bases truly are. And yet, perhaps the most alarming aspect is how normalized cartel infiltration has become. This was not the first raid in Georgia, nor will it be the last. Federal data shows that cartel-linked arrests have surged across southern states, while seizures of military-style weapons have doubled in the past 3 years. Cartels don't view overdose deaths as failures. They see them as collateral damage. If a user survives, they become addicted. If they die, the market remains profitable. The cold efficiency mirrors war zone logic. The objective is dominance, not sustainability. Which leads to the central question for this investigation. If cartel operatives in Georgia already possess the firepower of insurgents, how close are we to seeing them escalate into open conflict with law enforcement on American streets? The numbers behind the Athens raid are staggering, and they reveal the true scale of cartel operations on American soil. Federal agents confiscated 26 kilograms of cocaine, 1.7 kilograms of fentanyl, and significant quantities of methamphetamine, crack, cocaine, marijuana, and pharmaceutical pills. Put plainly, the fentanyl alone was enough to kill nearly 7 million people. To put that in perspective, that's more than the entire population of Massachusetts wiped out from a single seizure. The combined street value of the narcotics ran into the millions, and authorities say this was just one hub in a much larger supply chain stretching across state lines. The size of this bust underscores a grim reality. The United States is not just a consumer market for narcotics, it is a battleground where foreign cartels are waging a sustained campaign. The drugs taken off the streets in Athens could have fueled thousands of overdoses, destroyed families, and crippled entire communities. And yet law enforcement officials admit that for every major seizure, untold quantities slip through undetected. As one DEA officer told Reuters, "For every container, we intercept another 3 get past us." The human cost is impossible to ignore. Georgia alone reported more than 2,600 fentanyl overdose deaths in the past year, a 53% jump. That translates into more than 7 people dying every single day from synthetic opioids. The Centers for Disease Control projects that overdose deaths nationwide may surpass 110,000 annually if the trend continues. This is more than double the number of American combat deaths in Vietnam, except it happens every single year. The cartel's diversification into counterfeit pharmaceuticals makes the threat even more insidious. Agents discovered counterfeit pills Xanax, Adderall, and oxycodone laced with fentanyl and marketed towards students and young professionals. The DEA has warned that 6 in 10 fake pills seized in the United States now contain a lethal dose of fentanyl. This is not sloppy production, it is deliberate targeting. Cartels know that college towns like Athens provide a steady supply of inexperienced users who trust pills more than powders. In the words of a Guardian editorial, the pill has become the perfect Trojan horse of the opioid crisis. Weapons seized alongside the narcotics add another layer of concern. Among the 26 firearms were 12 rifles, numerous handguns, and the shocking discovery of a grenade launcher. Federal agents described the arsenal as designed for combat, not commerce. Military analysts point out that such weapons are not easily obtained in the civilian market, suggesting deeper ties between US-based operatives and transnational suppliers. Comparisons have been drawn to how Hezbollah or Russia-backed militias stockpile arms to secure control over territory. In this case, the territory was not a war zone abroad, but suburban neighborhoods in Georgia. This is where America's domestic crisis intersects with global conflict. According to security experts, the tactics cartels employ mirror those seen in modern hybrid warfare destabilization through asymmetric means. Just as Russia floods Ukraine with disinformation and proxy fighters cartels flood the United States with synthetic opioids and armed operatives, the intent is not ideological but economic, yet the destabilizing effect is eerily similar. A weakened America reeling from addiction and violence is less capable of projecting strength abroad. NATO officials privately warned that this erosion of domestic stability has long-term strategic consequences. President Trump's administration has responded by framing the drug war as a national security issue, not merely a law enforcement matter. Under Operation Take Back America, cartel-linked drug trafficking is treated with the same seriousness as counterterrorism. The rationale is clear: when an organization inside the US possesses enough fentanyl to exterminate entire cities and fields, combat-grade weapons, the distinction between organized crime and terrorism blurs. Federal prosecutors have already filed indictments carrying maximum penalties of life imprisonment, signaling a new era of uncompromising accountability. Yet the broader question remains: how much of the iceberg lies beneath the surface? If one Georgia operation yielded such staggering quantities of narcotics and weaponry, how many other cells are quietly entrenched across the United States waiting to be discovered? Behind the numbers are the individuals who turned Georgia into a cartel stronghold. Federal prosecutors identified 48-year-old Elio James Pineda, known by the alias Chito, as the ringleader of the Athens operation. His background Mexican, his mission to establish a permanent cartel foothold in the American South. Prosecutors allege that Pineda directed the movement of cocaine, fentanyl, and methamphetamine into Georgia, with military-style discipline transforming quiet neighborhoods into distribution hubs. But Pineda was not alone. Orlando Muckle, another key figure, had been trafficking narcotics in the state since at least 2020. His network moved more than 5 kilograms of cocaine and hundreds of grams of fentanyl through Georgia communities over several years. Authorities describe Muckle as a repeat offender who treated prison like a revolving door. His criminal record already included prior trafficking convictions, yet within months of release he was back at the center of a multi-million-dollar operation. This revolving door phenomenon is not unique. Several of those arrested in Athens were repeat offenders who had previously served time for drug crimes. Instead of reforming, they returned to business with cartel backing, this time with heavier weapons and more lethal products. Experts say this pattern highlights systemic weaknesses in America's justice system. In the words of a criminologist cited by BBC News, "We are watching the industrial-scale recycling of cartel operatives through US prisons. Every release is not rehabilitation, it's a reactivation." The strategic choice of Athens is particularly telling. It is home to the University of Georgia, where more than 40,000 students live, study, and socialize. Cartels exploit such environments by distributing counterfeit pills marketed as study aids or party drugs. A student seeking a boost during exams may unknowingly purchase a fentanyl-laced pill disguised as Adderall. One tablet can be enough to end a life. Federal agents say this trend has already contributed to multiple student overdoses in the region. For cartels, college towns offer both steady demand and reduced suspicion. From a geopolitical lens, the situation in Athens mirrors a troubling global trend. Transnational groups, whether drug cartels, terror cells, or militias, seek to exploit vulnerable populations. Just as ISIS targeted disillusioned youth in the Middle East with propaganda and false promises, cartels weaponize pills to trap young Americans into addiction. Analysts at Defense News warn that the synthetic opioid pipeline functions like a slow-moving weapon of mass destruction, one pill at a time. The fusion of drugs and arms also blurs the lines between crime and insurgency. A grenade launcher discovered in Georgia is not a tool for intimidation, it is a weapon of war. Security analysts compare the presence of such arms to Russia's covert transfer of manpads to separatists in eastern Ukraine or Iran's supply of drones to militias in Iraq. In each case, the message is clear: non-state actors can be as dangerous or more dangerous than conventional forces. By embedding in Athens, Pineda's network signaled that cartels intend to fight for territorial control inside the United States itself. The consequences ripple far beyond Georgia. If cartels can dig into a college town and arm themselves with military hardware, what prevents them from expanding into ports, airports, or critical infrastructure hubs? A senior official with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation warned this was not a side business. This was a foothold. Athens was not the target, it was the staging ground. The legal battle is now underway. Indictments against the arrested operatives carry penalties of life imprisonment, reflecting the federal government's shift to treating such crimes as domestic terrorism. Yet critics warn that unless the revolving door of repeat offenders is closed, new leaders will replace the old. Cartels are resilient, adaptable, and ruthless. And so the pressing question becomes, can America's justice system adapt as quickly as the cartels themselves, or will the cycle of release and reactivation continue to undermine national security? Dismantling the Athens network required a level of coordination usually reserved for counterterrorism or foreign operations. 13 agencies united under one banner: the FBI, DEA, ICE, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, local sheriff's offices, and federal prosecutors. Together, they executed 12 search warrants across Athens and Atlanta, conducted months of wiretaps, and deployed surveillance teams. This was not a typical narcotics raid, it was a military-style campaign on US soil. Officials compared the mission to neutralizing a paramilitary organization, and the description is not exaggeration. The agents who entered cartel-controlled houses faced heavily armed suspects and booby-trapped environments. The seizure of a grenade launcher, multiple rifles, and high-capacity magazines reinforced the reality that these were not street-level dealers. They were combatants preparing to confront law enforcement with battlefield-grade weapons. The strategy underpinning the raid was part of President Trump's initiative Operation Take Back America. Designed to mobilize federal and local resources against transnational cartels, the program elevates drug enforcement to a matter of national security. By treating cartel affiliates as potential domestic terrorists, the initiative justifies the use of advanced intelligence tools, military-style tactics, and harsher sentencing. A Justice Department briefing obtained by Reuters emphasized that this is no longer a war on drugs, it is a war on organized organized foreign insurgencies operating inside the United States. The Athens case illustrates why this shift is essential. Without coordination, local police departments would have been overwhelmed. By pooling resources, federal agents were able to dismantle an operation that had embedded itself over years. The importance of such cooperation echoes NATO principles. Abroad alliances are critical when facing adversaries who adapt quickly and exploit weaknesses. Just as NATO's united front deters aggression in Europe, multi-agency coalitions in the US form the backbone of resistance against cartel expansion. Security experts have drawn parallels between cartel crackdowns and counterinsurgency campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan. Both require patient intelligence gathering, infiltration of networks, disruption of supply chains, and targeted strikes. A senior analyst at Jane's Defense Weekly remarked Athens was less a police action and more a miniature Fallujah. While the contexts differ, the methods are strikingly similar. The timing of the raid also reflects broader geopolitical realities. In 2025, America's global attention is divided managing NATO's support for Ukraine, deterring Chinese expansion in the Pacific, and navigating escalating clashes between Israel and Iran. Critics argue that this divided focus risks leaving domestic threats unchecked. Yet the Athens raid shows that the US is attempting to fight on both fronts, protecting communities at home while projecting power abroad. If cartels are allowed to carve out enclaves inside America, the nation's credibility as a global security leader could erode. Allies may question whether the US can safeguard its own citizens while pledging to defend Europe or Asia. The operation's success is undeniable. 17 cartel operatives arrested, millions of dollars worth of drugs seized, and a cache of weapons removed from circulation. But law enforcement officials admit it is only one victory in a much longer campaign. The Sinaloa Cartel, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, and their affiliates maintain operations across dozens of American states. Like insurgents, they adapt after each loss, shifting routes, changing communications, and recruiting new operatives. This raises an urgent dilemma. Can raids like Athens be scaled nationwide? Multi-agency crackdowns are resource-intensive, requiring manpower funding and political will. If every state faces similar threats, will America have the capacity to fight cartels at home while simultaneously preparing for conflicts abroad? The Athens raid also serves as a wake-up call to American communities. For years, law enforcement officials warned that cartels no longer operate only at the border. They embed themselves inside the fabric of U.S. towns, often choosing soft targets like college campuses, suburban neighborhoods, and small cities. By the time a raid makes headlines, cartel networks have already spent years cultivating infrastructure, safe houses, local distributors, and encrypted communications channels. Families in Athens were stunned to learn that homes on Jennings Mill Parkway and Thomas Parkway had become distribution hubs. Streets once seen as safe suburban enclaves were being used to funnel narcotics into households, targeting both students and working-class families. Neighbors described waking up to flashbangs and armored vehicles, realizing only then that a paramilitary organization had been hiding in plain sight. The chilling truth is that such infiltration could happen anywhere. Cartels exploit vulnerabilities with precision. They use encrypted messaging apps to coordinate shipments, social media, to market counterfeit pills, and even delivery services to move drugs under the guise of legitimate commerce. In many ways, their methods resemble cybercriminal operations, anonymous, adaptable, and difficult to trace. The DEA has warned that today's cartels are as much digital networks as they are physical organizations. This convergence makes them harder to disrupt and more resilient after raids. The victims are often young people. Counterfeit Adderall, Xanax, and oxycodone pills laced with lethal fentanyl are pushed into college markets disguised as study aids or party drugs. According to the CDC, 6 in 10 fake pills seized in the US now contain deadly levels of fentanyl. For students stressed about exams, a single counterfeit pill can become a death sentence. Experts at The Guardian describe this as a silent battlefield where the enemy does not use bombs but blue tablets. Western analysts argue that this strategy mirrors psychological warfare. By saturating communities with lethal drugs, cartels weaken the social fabric of their adversary. It is an approach not unlike Russia's use of disinformation campaigns, or Iran's use of proxy militias' indirect attacks that destabilize societies from within. Former NATO intelligence officers now warn that the opioid crisis has become a national security threat, not simply a health issue. Law enforcement leaders are urging families to take drastic basic precautions. Never take a pill not prescribed directly by a doctor, one DEA agent told BBC News. Even we can't tell the difference between a real pill and a counterfeit without laboratory testing. The danger is invisible, and that invisibility makes it far more deadly. The Athens bust highlights a bitter truth. Every seizure is a victory, but every day more shipments arrive. Cartels treat overdose deaths as collateral damage. If a user survives, they become a paying customer. If they die, the product still circulates and demand remains steady. This ruthless calculus underscores why cartels are increasingly described as terrorist organizations rather than criminal syndicates. As America grapples with this reality, the question for ordinary citizens becomes urgent. If cartels can embed themselves in one college town, how many more communities are already compromised without anyone realizing it? The broader implications of the Athens raid stretch far beyond Georgia. This operation was not only about seizing drugs and weapons, it was a signal of how the United States intends to confront cartels under President Trump's leadership. By treating cartel operatives as terrorists rather than mere criminals, the government is reframing the battle as one of national survival. Western experts have long argued that the lines between organized crime and insurgency are blurring. The seizure of a grenade launcher in Athens drives that point home. Such weaponry is designed for war, not street crime. A former Pentagon strategist told DW, when you find a grenade launcher in a US suburb, you are no longer talking about gangs, you are talking about an occupying force. This is why Washington's policy shift matters. By invoking counterterrorism frameworks, authorities can deploy heavier investigative tools, apply harsher sentences, and mobilize broader coalitions. Globally, the timing of this escalation could not be more critical. In 2025, America faces pressure on multiple fronts. NATO remains heavily engaged in supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression, while tensions in the Middle East continue to flare as Israel and Iran edge closer to direct confrontation. Meanwhile, China challenges U.S. influence across the Pacific. Each of these crises stretches American resources thin. Against this backdrop, cartel infiltration at home becomes not just a domestic concern, but a vulnerability in America's global posture. If Washington cannot guarantee security within its own borders, allies may question the credibility of U.S. commitments abroad. This is why the Athens raid is being studied internationally as a case of domestic counterinsurgency. It demonstrates that when U.S. agencies unite, they can dismantle entrenched networks. 17 traffickers now face potential life sentences, millions of dollars worth of narcotics have been removed from circulation, and a paramilitary arsenal has been seized. Yet even as officials celebrate, they acknowledge the fight is far from over. Cartels are adaptive, well-financed, and ruthless. They will regroup, relocate, and return. Statistics underline the urgency. More than 110,000 Americans are projected to die from overdoses this year, surpassing battlefield casualties from every U.S. conflict since World War II combined. That staggering figure is not lost on policymakers. For many in Washington, this is not just about drugs, it is about sovereignty. Every overdose is a reminder that foreign-backed networks are waging silent war on American soil. President Trump has vowed to escalate the fight, pressing for cartels to be formally designated as foreign terrorist organizations. If adopted, such a policy could open the door to military operations, drone strikes on cartel strongholds outside the U.S., and unprecedented international cooperation. Supporters argue it is the only way to match the scale of the threat. Critics caution that militarization could draw America into deeper conflict abroad. But what unites both camps is the recognition that the status quo is untenable. And so the Athens raid becomes more than a headline. It is a case study in how modern America must confront a hybrid enemy, part criminal, part insurgent, wholly lethal. The question now is not whether law enforcement can win battles, but whether the nation can win the war. For viewers following this story, one question lingers: if this much firepower and poison was uncovered in a single raid, how many more hidden arsenals and drug caches are waiting quietly in neighborhoods across America? The FBI-led raid in Athens, Georgia revealed a chilling reality. Drug cartels are no longer confined to border regions. They are embedding themselves inside American communities with weapons of war and enough narcotics to wipe out entire cities. Flashbangs and armored vehicles on suburban streets underscored the transformation of drug crime into domestic counterinsurgency. Federal agents seized 26 firearms, including a grenade launcher, and 1.7 kilograms of fentanyl, enough to kill nearly 7 million people. The operation exposed a network led by Elio James Pineda and Orlando Muckle, both seasoned traffickers who exploited college towns to push counterfeit pills laced with fentanyl. Their methods mirrored global insurgency tactics, embedding in soft targets, exploiting vulnerabilities, and using advanced communications to evade detection. Operation Take Back America, championed by President Trump, framed the crackdown as part of a broader war against cartels treated as terrorist organizations. With overdose deaths climbing above 110,000 annually, experts warn the stakes are nothing less than national security. The Athens raid proved cartels can be dismantled through united action, but also revealed how deeply entrenched they have become. The real question: how many more communities are already under siege without even